It's about harnessing the power of the mastermind because we can't enjoy or create any success ourselves. Everything in the world is dependent on everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. So harnessing the power of the mastermind to be able to massively amplify where you're going to go and help you get there in the quickest manner as well.
Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, where we bring you powerful conversations surrounding the sensible and therapeutic use of psychedelics and plant medicines towards healing trauma. I'll introduce you to guests who, through their own personal journey and transformation, tell the Worth the Fight story. I'm your host, Matt Simpson, author of Worth the Fight, Acting for a Better World, a guide to spirituality, psychedelic medicines, and overcoming trauma. Thank you for listening.
I am thrilled to announce the Worthy Fight Mastermind. What is it? It's a 60-day comprehensive deep dive where we're bringing together people in the spirit of harmony to engage the power of group flow, the power of the mastermind, which I accredit 95 to 98% of the ideas that I've come up with these past many years have been from masterminds that I've aligned myself with. Even in my corporate days, it was the mastermind that I had with Mr. Shapiro and his gang that helped me to see what I couldn't see for myself in order to untangle myself from that corporate mess that I write about in my book, Worth the Fight. Who is this for? This is for anybody that is earnestly looking to level up, to be the best possible versions of themselves, to bring an idea out into the world. We are going to bust up some habits that don't serve our highest good and foster the necessary habit for an epic 2020. I'll be sharing all of the tips and hacks and strategies that I present in my book, Worth the Fight. The past 3 to 5 years, I've had 3 world-class coaches, and I hope to impart that same wisdom that I've gotten from those coaches. The principles that I stand by, all 7 billion of us have a dharma, have a calling or life purpose, whatever you want to call it, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be uncovered. I don't judge. Read my book and you'll know why I can't judge. But I do observe, and I help my clients error correct. I revere this service, this extension of my path as a sacred duty and obligation to help people move through some of the challenges that I've had on my journey. As the Stoics say, the obstacle becomes the way. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. I believe Marcus Aurelius said that. And that is so ever present and true in my journey right now. And I have a group starting December 16th. Reach out if this offering is alive for you. If you're interested in hearing more details about the Worthy Fight Mastermind, please share with any loved ones, friends, or family that might be interested in this offering as well. Thank you for keeping me in mind. Speaking of masterminds, my next guest is a brilliant man I've come to know this past month here in Los Angeles, James Whittaker, the author of Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, which is a follow-up or modern-day version of Think and Grow Rich, which is the greatest self-help book of all time, written by Napoleon Hill in 1937. We're going to dive deep into these teachings. You might think that this is a diversion, as we don't hit much on psychedelic medicines, but I feel these teachings of Napoleon Hill have been so profoundly impactful on my journey, and I feel like they align perfectly with this alternative path of healing, with the growth path. And this is going to be a super inspiring, exciting conversation. James is super connected and dialed in. I learned so much from this man. It was such a privilege to have this time to talk shop, and we've had a couple coffee meetings, and just really wowed and inspired by his enthusiasm and his commitment to pushing forward this work and keeping the spirit of Napoleon Hill alive, and these old school teachings, keeping them intact and maintaining the integrity of these teachings. Without further ado, I give you my conversation with James Whittaker, the author of Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. Thank you so much for listening.
What is it about the teachings of Napoleon Hill that have you so motivated to keep this legacy alive?
Well, Napoleon Hill, growing up in Wise County, Virginia, which was in the middle of nowhere and still is in the middle of nowhere. I was out there a couple of years ago to visit Don Green, who's the executive director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. So he gave me a tour of where Napoleon Hill grew up and a lot of background of his family and things as well. But Napoleon Hill was inspired in his own life by having the right mentor who came along, which was the woman who his father had married, who basically gave Napoleon Hill a typewriter and helped him understand that there was a different pathway in his life. And it was only when he was a young reporter and had the opportunity to interview people like Andrew Carnegie, who was, of course, one of the wealthiest people in the history of civilization, but still to this day remains one of the greatest philanthropists the world has ever seen, who funded more than 7,000 libraries and has done so many things, who became the next mentor for Napoleon Hill to set him on that journey of interviewing more than 500 people to help change the world. And I feel like I am now, having been involved in the projects I have been involved with the foundation and 2 more projects coming out in 2020, I feel a deep sense of duty to be true to this name and the lessons from Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie, because all they wanted to do was create a blueprint to harmony, a way that everyone around the world could help figure out.
The sound of that, a blueprint to harmony.
For sure.
Like
they needed to help figure out exactly who they are, what work they're best suited to, and basically just living in harmony as the world's biggest mastermind to help raise the standards of living for people everywhere. And I feel like a lot of that message has gotten lost because of the best-selling self-help book of all time being Think and Grow Rich. People who haven't read it and think about the title, they think it's about mere monetary value.
And the monetary value is just a product of living the principles.
Absolutely. And there's a lot more to life than money as well. So it's all about being able to do the best for yourself and doing the best for your family and doing the best for your community to help raise the standards of people everywhere. That was the mission of Napoleon Hill, and that was the mission of Andrew Carnegie. And I think in a time right now where for the last, not to give you too much of a long-winded answer off the bat, but the World Happiness Report shows that people are increasingly unhappy despite all the things that we have right now. We are the most connected civilization of all time. We are the wealthiest people of all time. We have the highest standards of living of all time, but we are increasingly unhappy. Each year we are increasingly unhappy. So that's what I'm trying to do now, and my mission in my own small way is to really help reinvigorate today's generations using these lessons that have been so powerful for so many people for so long.
Yeah, they've been immensely powerful and have informed my path to such a high degree. And I thank you for doing this work and for keeping that spirit alive. Why do you think people are so unhappy? We're the most connected, the wealthiest, all the metrics are in our favor, but we're growing more and more miserable.
I think it's getting worse with things like social media and technology, which of course is so good, can actually be quite harmful for us as well. There's a thing called social comparison theory that says if we don't have a means of evaluating our own sense of self-worth, that we will look externally for that, like upward social comparison, where we compare ourselves to people who we believe are doing... Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We compare ourselves to people who we believe are doing better than us, and downward social comparison, where we compare ourselves to people who are doing worse than us as a way of figuring out that sense of self-worth. And when you use social media, where people post a perfect snapshot of an imperfect day that's been tweaked and photoshopped and edited
so
and
true.
had every filter run through it, as much as we know that it is a facade and it's all smoke and mirrors, we still feel it. And that's when these phrases like, I'll be happy if, I'll be happy when, I'd be happy if I had that person's body, or if I had that person's house, or if I had that person's car, we put off happiness to the future instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to be happy today, whatever it may bring. Come rain, hail, or shine. And in the last week here in LA, we have had a lot of rain, hail, or shine. So a lot of the work that I do right now is basically to help people be happy in the present moment, whatever that might bring. Because if you put off happiness till tomorrow, you will notice that tomorrow never arrives.
Never arrives. Yeah, the present moment and gratitude comes to mind. And that's a central teaching of Napoleon Hill as the OG original law of attraction teacher.
The Godfather.
The Godfather, indeed. That really has informed anybody that's doing anything in our world. There's a correlation that I've seen is that Napoleon Hill and these teachings have impacted their lives. Is that something that you've seen?
Absolutely. Every single industry's innovation and transformation for the last century has in one way or another been shaped by these principles of Napoleon Hill, either directly from having read Think and Grow Rich or being inspired by people who had read Think and Grow Rich, or through applying the principles that exist without them even being aware of it. They might not be following the blueprint, but if you go and look back, it's all about desire and figuring out what they want. It's about having the faith that casts aside fear and enables them to see it through to the end. It's about harnessing the power of the mastermind, because we can't enjoy or create any success ourselves. Everything in the world is dependent on everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. So harnessing the power of the mastermind to be able to massively amplify where you're going to go and help you get there in the quickest manner as well. These are all the principles that have shaped the world that we live in right now. So I think Napoleon Hill's principles are more relevant than ever, and we are absolutely shaped. It's funny, this book that's coming out, Andrew Carnegie's Mental Dynamite in 2020, that I've just been asked to annotate, basically to do what Sharon Lecter did with Outwitting the Devil, which is another very well-known Napoleon Hill manuscript.
Profound.
It's great, isn't it? It
Profound,
sold more than
yes.
300,000 copies. And I'm so excited for this project. But what they talk about in this, it really is a cure for homelessness, democracy, relationships, career advancement, industrial relations. In a world where we feel like we have increasingly complex problems, there's actually very real, very simple solutions that were provided by people like Andrew Carnegie and disseminated by Hill, and have been carried upon by all these other leaders as well. So I think if we can go right back to the root of these teachings, we would simplify a lot of these problems and have a much more comfortable and happier society today.
I like that. I like getting back to the basics and tuning out the noise. We're in a time where we're just getting wham-basted by information and, embracing the fundamentals. This is something that has been extraordinarily helpful. These teachings, for me on my journey, coming across Outwitting the Devil, the book that you just mentioned. I remember my friend Janelle had sent that to me in a time when I was in a vulnerable state, really open to suggestion, and it was one of those hair-raising moments when I got that book and listened to that manuscript, and we're essentially, it's Napoleon Hill interviewing the devil, over which is fear, and the lower side of our nature. And can you speak about that? 300,000 copies?
Yeah, 300,000 copies. It's funny that our mental state has an enormous correlation to the meaning that we attach to things as well. So it's funny when you mention that, like it's the whole when the student is ready, the master will appear type thing as well.
Yeah,
and they're
poignant and eerie.
Absolutely.
When it came, it's such a charged, powerful manuscript.
Yeah, I had read Think and Grow Rich for the first time when I was a teenager, and it didn't do much for me because I just wasn't ready to receive it yet. But all the people who I interviewed for Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, had commented that they read it every year or every few years because they don't notice something new in the book. They notice something new in themselves. And the idea of outwitting the devil, to me, is a suggestion that each day, if we do not make the decision to win, we have automatically made the decision to lose. So that poverty consciousness will automatically overtake any mind that is not preoccupied with being success conscious. So really figuring out what it is that you want in life and having that intent and that direction. Otherwise, you're just going to fall to anything and everything. And each day it might simply be distraction and procrastination. Mm-hmm. But over time, that will manifest in poverty, ill health, misery, and worse.
Yeah. What does Napoleon say? The idle time is the devil's workshop time.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's like a muscle we don't use. Yeah.
Well, we had such an inspired conversation last week. It's such a joy to be back here and to connect with you. As you know, the Worth the Fight podcast is really the core values are we're looking to retell the story around psychedelic medicines and trauma. And ultimately, our war veterans. If we earnestly seek a peaceful planet, I believe that healing the hearts and minds of our war veterans is an absolute must. They can teach us all the lessons that we're ignoring. Have you had any psychedelic experiences that have informed your life?
I actually haven't. Full disclosure, I haven't. But I know a lot of people who have, and I'm certainly following the trends around the different studies that are happening around the world and around America, which I'm actually quite excited to see. Australia, being from Australia originally, Australia typically moves pretty slow We're often called a nanny state because of the different things. I think if anything, we're getting...
A nanny state?
Yeah, nanny state. We're getting stricter and stricter. They actually just rolled out a trial in New South Wales, which is a state in Australia. I think it's by population, it might be the biggest state in Australia, which is something I probably should know, having grew up there for 30 years.
Sure.
They rolled out a thing now with your mobile phone to determine whether or not you're driving. Your mobile phone will be able to tell that, which is pretty amazing for things like traffic tickets and whatnot, which is probably a good thing, but also the nanny state for so many different things. And I think this psychedelic medicine is such an important thing when we talk about PTSD. I've spoken to many people who have been in the military, who have served, first responders, who have had or still have or have had family members or other people affected by PTSD. And I would love to see a solution, which is why I'm so happy and proud of all the work you're doing, something that would create more of a permanent solution without that dependency on the whole pharmaceutical industry that I've been skeptical about basically my entire life.
Yeah, I think we're waking up to that aspect, and it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. The last guest that I had, the Worth the Fight podcast, was Rick Doblin, or it was a few episodes back, and the work being done that we've talked about with MDMA-Assisted Therapy in phase 3 clinical trials with our federal government, and this conversation with Rick, and one of the big challenges is how does this medicine fit into the current model? And certainly that's no reason not to pursue progress. It's a challenge. It's a challenge that the FDA is aware of, but this is progress. They have a cure. The phase two trials are showing that 2/3 of people that are engaging this protocol of 1 to 3 therapeutic sessions, they heal, they get right, they feel that thing that they've been unable to feel in a safe setting, reprocess these emotions, or let the emotions go, reprocess the memories, and they're, in 2/3 of the case, are shedding their diagnosis and not taking pills anymore. So, and that is a potential game changer for the economic models that are currently in place.
It's phenomenal. And I think over time, as you start to see more and more of those results come through, and we spoke last time about how with the results that they have right now, you would expect them to only get better as they start to modify and optimize these different things as well. And there was a video I watched a couple of years back where it was talking about, do you really think a corporation has your best health interests at heart? And they really don't. They've got they're heavily incentivized
shareholders
by profits.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And another thing, actually growing up, being in California for the last 6 years, I am amazed at how quickly the whole CBD market over here has exploded. And I think when you have markets like that do so well, when you see states that will then become tempted and as a result addicted to the tax revenue being generated by a lot of these legalization things, I think that's going to probably start to help awareness around these different programs. And I think for anyone running these trials to be able to highlight the economic benefit that the governments at a state level and at a federal level will have as a result of having treatments done, I think has got to be really important as part of this fight to being able to roll it through quicker.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a lot of things that have happened with the self-driving market now. I know a lot of that stuff is hidden, but we have seen a lot of pushback from the traditional automotive manufacturers and the support that they have in the government, pushback against companies like Tesla, which to me is absolutely crazy when you would think that safety of the consumers should be the most important thing if you're a citizen of a country.
Sure. These institutions or these paradigms, change is such a challenging aspect, and things are changing so rapidly right now, and some of these holdovers are gonna grip tightly, and just like the taxis did for a little while with Uber, but this, if you're not getting with this wave of change, I think you're gonna get steamrolled by it. So
absolutely,
just like they were left in the dust.
Yeah, in Australia, when Uber came along to Australia, regardless of how you feel about Uber, I know they've had some issues around treatment of workers and things like that. On
Sure.
one hand, they provide the
Hearing that more and
flexibility.
more, yeah.
On the other side, are they classified as contractors or employees? But in Australia, the government actually, from the taxpayer dollars, had paid out taxi drivers as a result of the innovation of Uber and car sharing and things like that to actually pay because there was the Labor government, the Democratic equivalent government in power at the time, to start contributing some of this money to taxi drivers. On one hand, I can see that if that's been your career, it's difficult to have this disruption. But on the other hand, I can see the argument that this is disruption. It's
evolution.
It's evolution.
It's evolution.
If strongest of the species that survives, it's the one that adapts to change is the one that's going to survive, not the strongest. And that's why if you've got a business or any type of product, if someone is able to move in next door with a business that's twice as good as half the price, you need to be able to have the awareness of seeing that. So I do really hope that a lot of these companies and the government in particular can see maybe ways of partnering or just maybe ways of bringing all this treatment to the forefront, because this is the future, and I can't even imagine what that looks like for harmony within families and within communities, and what that then does.
The benefit could be astronomical.
Yeah.
When you think about how many we have millions of war veterans that are struggling and stuck. I believe as of last year, there was just over 1 million war veterans here in the U.S. that are getting disability payments for PTSD, and these disability payments, many of them are Iraq and Afghanistan, modern day. They're going to be getting these for the rest of their lives. That's a lot of taxpayer dollars. I think that it was broken down to $30 billion a year. Speaking of numbers, hard numbers of how this can potentially affect, but the ripple effect of having healthy, happy, and strong people that are free from their trauma diagnosis, given medicines that work so they can let go and shed these traumatic war memories and live and enjoy the freedoms that they fought for.
And then that creates eligibility in the workforce as well, which has a considerable economic impact as well. And these are things that I feel like aren't
virtuous
spoken.
Cycle. Good
Absolutely.
Creates more good.
They're not; these things aren't spoken enough or aren't spoken about as much as they should be. And being in LA, where there is a significant homeless population as well, I'm yet to hear a good solution to this. The last thing I heard, they were going to build some massive complex right near the beach as a way of trying to figure all this stuff out. I'm yet to hear a good solution, but this seems to be the right angle. Obviously, there's a significant portion of people who have PTSD who end up on the streets, which is a horrible thing to have. So I think any method, any process that enables these people to start get some quality of life back, and again to start to have some eligibility for them to be able to create and share their unique gifts with the world in whatever way that might be, as well as being able to support themselves, I think is a phenomenal mission and something we should all be open to.
I love it. I feel like I'm talking to myself. This positive aspect, and you're bringing the Napoleon Hill teachings to our conversation here, and yeah, I feel that strongly. And I look at our homeless, this pandemic that we have here in Los Angeles, as I think that there's 60,000. Is that something that I've heard? And I just saw a camp on a street and this camp wasn't there a week ago. So that is something to say.
Yeah, I'm noticing that more and more as well. It's even down on. I used to live in Marina del Rey, right next to Venice, and I mean these tent cities are popping up even more when they're under the highways. But now they're just some of the most expensive rents in the entire country. Places like Rose Avenue, and people camping out in storefronts on Abbot Kinney and things as well. It's a very difficult problem to solve. On the one hand, you've got people who own these storefronts who are hardworking, tax-paying citizens. But you've also got these other people who, in many cases, feel like they've got nowhere else to go. Where do you draw the line? What's that balance? Throwing money at the problem. It's very, very clear that has not worked historically. And whatever has been tried now, it just keeps getting worse and worse. I mean, I'm seeing, if anything, it seems like the homeless population is increasing exponentially. I can't speak for other parts of the country, but certainly here in LA. I had a friend in town from Scotland who I met in downtown for dinner a couple of weeks ago. He was staying at a hotel downtown. He went for a run, and he commented to me he reached a point where he'd taken a wrong turn, and he just all of a sudden felt extremely unsafe where he was in the middle of the day downtown. And that is what Los Angeles is. It's this enormous dichotomy between the rich and the famous, and the people who have the absolute polar opposite as well. And I think we need to recognize the principle, actually, which is coming out of this Mental Dynamite, the Andrew Carnegie Napoleon Hill book that will be released in 2020, that what you do to one, you do to all, and vice versa. I feel like that message has gotten lost along the way. It's like we're all people, we're all connected, all intricately connected together. What you do to one, you do to the other, and it all has economic impacts as well. So rather than shunning people, figuring out what we can do to raise the standards of living and awareness and growth for everyone, just to be able to have that sense of self-worth and contribute to society, because that's all they want to do. All of us.
Yeah, I think so. And I look at as all of this as unprocessed emotions, and the people that are struggling, they're mentally ill, and they're challenging with deep emotions, and they don't have a safe place to share and to unburden themselves, and they're stuck in these negative like feedback loops that hopefully in time, as this movement progresses, that this psychedelics as medicine renaissance will brush up against that, and to be able to provide safe spaces for people that are down and out to heal and get right, and to embrace and ultimately to find purpose and meaning through work. I mean, how we spend our time is such there's such a correlate to our mental health, and finding meaning with our work that we're doing, and it breaks my heart to see so many people that are lost of that here, and it's my hope and prayer that one of my heroes, Stephen Kotler, he's got this bold message that I've been loving lately, and I know that you'll appreciate this, and it's certainly aligned with our conversation that we had last week, that it's abundance or bust, and this abundance, I believe, is available and should be freely accessed by everyone.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's that really is the mentality, but I guess people who have the scarcity mindset see it as a finite pie rather than an infinite pie, where there's only a limited amount to go around. I need to grab my share before you can grab what potentially might be into my share as well. But creating that sense of abundance for everyone, and a lot of people might think that as some type of fantastical naivety or optimism, but it's quite simply not the case. I fundamentally agree and believe in the spirit of optimism and abundance to help raise the vibrations of connection that we have around the world. And I do say that America has actually very good recognition, at least recognition of its service members and troops and first responders and things as well, which Australia is getting better at. But America has also been heavily involved with the sheer numbers of the population been involved in these military conflicts for the last, going back for a long, long time. For people who were living today, when we've got World War II and the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and everything that's happened in the Middle East, that's a lot of people coming back with a huge gun ownership percentage as well. And then when I feel like once you can start factoring in things like availability of drugs and things as well, it certainly creates a lot of issues. But now is the time is right, which is what I love about the mission that you're doing, to help inspire people with the possibilities of what they can actually achieve if they put their mind to it, rather than being down and out forever. Hey, look, this is a slump. We're all a work in progress. I posted on my Instagram yesterday that I'm a work in progress every day, as I believe everyone is a work in progress every day. There is a brighter future if you're open to it. Let's just figure out a way to help get the most of everything that you've got right now.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. In Worth the Fight, I make a bold assertion, or what's the right word for this? But
assertion's a good one. Yeah.
Assertion about whether the good people of the United States, if given an opportunity to vote on a new standard, a modern day standard, a new seminal text, if Think and Grow Rich would give the Bible a run for its money. And I think it would. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it absolutely would. I think although its title did a fantastic job of helping spread like wildfire, I do think like there's an element of the population who, if they haven't read it, will associate that with mere monetary wealth. But I 100% agree. I have never met a more complete text to happiness and success and prosperity, not just for you, but for your community, than Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, a book released in 1937, which is just crazy that is so
Still
long
holds
ago.
true.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's another book I actually really love, which I'm sure you're aware of, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. They were written with, or they were released within 1 year of each other. I feel like those two books, the way they talk about being able to take possession of your own mind, and the best way to give is to get, and being of service to others and everything else is so important. So I absolutely, massively believe in that. And it's interesting another thing that I love in that section of your book as well that you talk about is the idea of discarding things that no longer serve us in 2019 and 2020. In this modern world that we're in, why are we paying attention to these things that are thousands of years old that mightn't have any bearing and in fact might do a disservice to the life we're trying to live?
They might be endangering
right now.
Our evolution. Yeah.
We've seen, you and I have spoken about this at length. We've seen religion that can be used for good or it can be used for evil. We've seen books like Think and Grow Rich, which can be used for enormous good. And we've seen the so-called spiritual gurus. There's some good ones these days, don't get me wrong, but there's some bad ones as well that can use this to help try and occupy people's mind in a not great way. That's why I love connecting with like-minded people, as you do as well, to basically let people know about the possibilities available for them. But everything, I guess it comes down to life. Every single day we have everything that we need to succeed, just as we have everything that we need to destroy ourselves. That is the option that we have every day. We just need to create more and more awareness around that option to help people win the day, which is the whole message with everything that I talk about.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, the idea that in a central part of my messaging that is tying this unchecked church sex abuse to the war and conflict that we see here on earth. And I'm a big believer that this, and hopefully, people are waking up to this reality and something that we're seeing an insanely high disproportionate amount of our war veterans. It's the childhood sexual trauma that appears to be driving them to war. This trauma breeds more trauma. And if we could get to the root and call a spade, and one of the ideas that Think and Grow Rich, it's a antidote to dogma, as Napoleon Hill, and maybe that's why I was so gravitated. I've been so gravitated towards these teachings, is that they're science based and no dogma.
That's true, and I think there needs to be a level when we talk about this sexual abuse and indeed any significant or major difficulties and things that people have overcome in their life. Many times it's due to no fault of their own as well. I feel like there needs to be a method, some type of avenue of being open about those experiences, because the more you keep it with yourself, that's when you can start living with shame and live with guilt, and you just feel you have a horrible sense of self-worth, whatever it might be. But it's the moment when you free yourself of that vulnerability where you can start to take off those layers of armor, which I've realized a lot in my own journey as well for the last few years, that I had so much of this negative self-talk, and it was only once I became open about a lot of the struggles that I went through when I was young that all of a sudden I felt like, oh wow, this is who I am. And not only was I now able to empower others who were who were in a similar situation to help release themselves of that, I felt totally free for the first time as well. So I think, as you said, we absolutely need to figure out a way to start treating the root causes of these things rather than packaging Band-Aid solutions for the symptoms. But I'm also a huge believer of creating avenues and platforms for people to be vulnerable and reveal who they really are. And in many cases, you can actually package that into being a strength and part of your brand to tell your story that you can leverage to make a significant impact around the world. The worst thing that ever happened to you.
People are doing that right now.
Every
beautiful to
adversity
see.
carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater
Ooh,
benefit.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that teaching.
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
Every seed carries with it the seed of an equal or every adversity, rather. I'm sorry, that's one quote I shouldn't be butchering. Every adversity carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And in my book, Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy, we talk about everyone. I feel like everyone in the whole world, by the age of 30, they've all overcome or faced some significant adversity. Not all of us have overcome them, and often people go through that as a chip on their shoulder for the rest of their lives. But in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy, the very first story is Janine Shepherd, who was an Australian cross-country skier who had qualified for the Winter
Powerful
Olympics in
story.
Calgary. Yeah, it's phenomenal. She was hit by a truck a few months before the Winter Olympics while on a bike ride, a training ride, and she was airlifted to hospital, spent 10 days in a coma where her parents were told she wouldn't live. And then she woke up, she lost almost every ounce of blood in her body, broke almost every bone, spent 6 months in the spinal ward. I mean, what she has been able to achieve since, when she had no right to live. And they said she'd never be able to have kids. She's got 3 beautiful kids now. She can ski. She can walk despite still being classified as a paraplegic. She's got a TED Talk with like 5 million views.
Wow.
Her videos on the internet have almost 1 billion views on Goldcast and things. People like Jim Stovall, who is also in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy, who at the age of 17 was told he'd go totally and permanently blind. And I can't even imagine that if at one stage, I think I'd almost rather not have been able to see the world at all rather than literally having your whole world eventually fade to black. And he became the author of 30 best-selling books despite the fact that he was blind and had never written a single book before. And he was also the founder of the Narrative Television Network because he realized that blind and visually impaired people did not have a means of being able to access media and television programming and movies. They did not have a means of being able to access that like people who had their sight could have. So he went and created it. I mean, these are the stories. So people who have I'm yet to hear of an adversity that outweighs what some of these people have been able to do. So whatever excuse you really have, and I don't mean it to sound insensitive, but whatever excuse you have for not achieving something is totally invalid. You have it within you. You just need to be able to come up with the right plan. That's where people can help. You're doing it with your book. I'm doing it with my book and everything else that I'm doing to help people unleash those inner gifts. You already have it. Everything you need to succeed is already within your possession.
Love that.
Follow this plan that's worked for everyone in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy. Follow this plan that's worked for everyone in Think and Grow Rich. No one is born with a gold medal around their neck, and success does not discriminate. It comes to all those who do what needs to be done.
Wow, so much to unpack there. The idea that we're in a time where vulnerability is not a word that I think it still makes some people squirm, but we're waking up to the gospel of Brene Brown and the paradoxical power of vulnerability. And, I say this about every third episode, and I'm going to keep doing it because this is a central part of my messaging, but vulnerability builds trust. Without trust, we can't have connection. Connection is why we are here. And I think that the more that we, people raise their hand and share openly and honestly about their struggles. And that's what I love about the teachings of Napoleon Hill is to shine a light on the fact that all of these 500 people that he interviewed, the highest performers that built our country, all of them overcame tremendous adversity. There was, without exception. And I think that that's really, really profound when so many people are struggling in silence. And that is the result of this mental health crisis that we're in, with depression rates soaring, people stuck in addiction, the opioid crisis that claims 193 lives per day, and, anxiety and all of these.
Is that just America as well? 193
here. Yeah.
Crazy.
Our country's on fire. And, no big pharma executives are going to see any jail time for that.
Sure.
And but I think that this violation of their fiduciary duty to do right by the American people has opened the door for this psychedelic renaissance. And karma's a bitch. So we'll see how it all shakes out. And But yeah.
I wanted to quickly mention there as well as a statistic that I share during my speeches. It talks about, well, first of all, when you're talking about Napoleon Hill, all this stuff is from the written word. You've never met Napoleon Hill. I've never met Napoleon Hill, yet he's been such a profound mentor and influence for us. That's why you can go on news books and things like that as
written word and on Spotify. His
At
lectures are on
Spotify, the
Spotify.
Napoleon Hill lectures, you and I both love
I've
them as
probably
well.
logged in over 100 hours in the last 3 years listening to his profound lectures. Back to the basics, almost akin to taking ground balls or shooting free throws. It's just pure fundamentals.
Absolutely.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're 100% spot on. But there's a statistic that says in America, the slide that I hold up during my presentations, I say, well, how much do you think Americans spend on lottery tickets every year? Do you think it's A, $73 million, B, $730 million, or B, $7.3 billion? And most people put up their hands for C, $7.3 billion, and they're like, wow, that's such an astronomical number. And then I move to the next slide, and the answer's D, $73 billion is spent by Americans on lottery tickets every single year. Now, all research done on lottery winners show that there is no significant uptick in long-term happiness as a result of winning the lottery anyway, but that doesn't stop people from spending $73 billion a year for a 1 in 300 million chance of hitting the lottery jackpot. And that number, $73 billion, is more than 5 times the amount of money that is spent on books every single year. Pretty much every...
Shit.
It's crazy, isn't it?
We're doomed.
Yeah, we're absolutely doomed.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. That's why you and I are writing books. But I find that statistic absolutely fascinating because when I do those speeches as well, I ask people, have you ever read a book that's changed your life? And almost every person puts up their hand. And pretty much every book I read changes my life in one way or another. But how many lottery tickets do you have to buy before you start to see a return on investment? And you may never see a return on investment. So I think that's just an important thing to remember, that for a buck, there are books that have entered the public domain that you can go and download for free, or you can go and buy from secondhand bookstores. Even in this neighborhood the other day, my wife showed me some mailboxes or mailbox looking things, almost like little pantries where people are leaving books. Apparently,
Ooh,
it's
I love
like
those. I love
it's like a book swap.
community engagement. Absolutely, I've been seeing those on my travels, and I think that it's a beautiful idea.
Yeah,
you know,
I
you
feel
read
like I've moved into the right neighborhood.
Yeah, you put it in there, you put it in the box, and people can swap and pass things on, and that's one of the beauties of reading and sharing these messages and sharing these books and these programs ultimately.
Absolutely. One simple book that you can access, whether you get it from someone else. If anyone listening right now doesn't have access to be able to go and grab a copy of the book, email me at james@jameswitt.com, and then I'll send you a copy of my book for free. You need to be resourceful and resilient, I feel like, are the two most important attributes on this planet, and people don't talk about them enough. To being able to have that resourcefulness enough to get what you want, because everything is negotiable and there's always a way, and having that resilience, because how you respond to adversity when it inevitably strikes, as it does for all of us, that's what separates ordinary people from the extraordinary achievers.
Beautiful. Thank you for that gift, and I'm sure to put your information in the show notes where people can find your work. And I applaud your book. And the movie. There's a movie that has come out. You're associated with that too, right?
Yes, I'm co-executive producer of the film. Came out in it's basically the first time ever that Think and Grow Rich has been made into a movie.
It's powerful.
Yeah, Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy. You can go and check it out. It's actually very different, Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy movie to the book. Just by virtue of the medium, the book can go into a lot more detail of these stories. Yeah, whereas in the movie, it's very engaging and obviously something you can sit there and watch together as a family or as a group. But I think they're great complementary products and can help give people that inspiration, to help you get to that, help you put one foot in front of the other.
Beautiful. Well, I applaud your commitment to, and your positive spirit that you're bringing to our world, and keeping these fundamental law of attraction teachings alive. Besides, what was the name of the skier that you'd?
Janine Shepherd.
Janine Shepherd. Are there any other stories from your book that you'd like to share that are topical?
Janine Shepherd, that one was so powerful to me because her and I are now extremely close. We talk almost every day. She stays here whenever she comes to LA. She'll be here next week and then the week after that. She's a phenomenal woman. And when I met her at an airport hotel in LA, obviously I didn't know her the first time I met her, but I walk very, very quickly normally. Now, this is a bit of a funny story, actually. And I had gone to meet her, and I'd done my research, but I just wasn't expecting what I saw. She still has a difficulty moving, and you know, she shuffles along. She can't move. You know, she's not like Usain Bolt, an Olympic sprinter or anything like that. And someone had walked past her and almost bumped her walking very, very quickly. And I was like, oh my God, that's me in almost every situation. I walk very, very quickly and do most things very, very quickly. And it was a lesson to me that you never know what other people are going through. And God forbid there had been a situation where if I had been walking too quickly or staring at my phone as we do from time to time, distracted, and you bump into someone. But if you actually knew her story and her struggle and everything else that she's been through, oh my God, that hit me like an absolute bolt of lightning. And being able to interview people like her and Jim Stovall and all these other people, I mean, it's just given me an enormous sense of empathy and actually made me probably about 30 or 40% more emotional as a result of just hearing these stories and just the struggles that people have every day.
It was wonderful to read Warren Moon's story. Yeah, you know, he was somebody who was an idol of mine growing up.
Which one, sorry?
Warren Moon.
Warren Moon. Oh, yeah, Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah. Phenomenal. I mean, a guy who was really cast aside, shunned by his own country at a time when being a black athlete is the face of a franchise, an NFL franchise,
and a leadership role as a quarterback.
Yeah, it was quite unheard of.
Yeah.
So he had to go to Canada, and it was only once he absolutely dominated over there.
MVP like 3 years in a row, wasn't it? Something crazy like that before
the Grey Cup
change our minds here in the States and say, hey, let's give the guy a chance.
Absolutely. He made himself impossible to ignore. Yeah. He made himself irresistible as a result of how good he was, purely through persistence and getting up and
Steve
putting
Martin's,
in that hard work when no one was watching.
Be so good that you can't ignore.
It's a fantastic quote, and that's exactly what he did. There was another person who I interviewed, not for this book, but about 5 years ago, a guy called Todd Love. And he, at the age of 20, had walked into a house in Afghanistan to clear it of threats, and he stepped on an IED, and he woke up 2 days later. He woke up to find out, obviously when you're walking into a house and then you wake up 2 days later in hospital, you're wondering what the hell happened. And he went down to feel where his legs were, and all he could feel was the hospital bed. And both his legs had been blown off in this explosion by this IED that was made of low-grade metallic copper, so his metal detector didn't pick it up. And then the doctor came in and said that his arm was so badly damaged that it would need to be amputated at the elbow. So imagine that at the age of 20, being a triple amputee. And I said to Todd, how do you feel about the accident now looking back at it? And he said, I view it as a gift because it made me appreciate all the love and kindness that I have in my world right now, all the people who care for me and mean the world to me. And that was so profound for me. I'll absolutely never forget that moment. And it was just an amazing thing that some of the adversities and hardship that people have overcome, it really is quite extraordinary. We are so much stronger than we know about as well. There's so many lessons out there as well. And that's why I wanted Think and Grow Rich, the legacy, to really be a collection of short stories, because I feel like not only are they more engaging and easy to remember, people just enjoy learning about, hearing about struggles from, if not someone in their exact situation, someone who they can be inspired by, who have overcome enormous adversity along the way.
Absolutely. And then tying in the relevant teachings of Napoleon Hill and summarizing them in I felt a more digestible manner, which, although Think and Grow Rich is the highest grossing self-help book of all time, it's a little bit dense.
It is. It can be a very, very tough read. Many people have said that to me as well. So I like the idea now that Think and Grow Rich, the legacy, can be a good introduction, because people are thinking, well, how do I get inspired by Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie and Helen Keller? Well, you can start my book and be inspired by the Navy SEALs and Sarah Blakely, the youngest self-made female billionaire of all time, or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Janine Shepherd, Warren Moon, Rob Dyrdek. I mean, all these different people who are featured in this book, just to help you really figure out who you want to be and what you want to do.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. I want to take advantage of being here with somebody who is equally, if not more, obsessed with these teachings and the research that you've done and understanding Napoleon Hill. He speaks about his invisible guides. Do you or what are your impressions on that? He speaks of the metaphysical and
seeking counsel from people who don't necessarily need to be alive. I think it's very, very powerful. I think one of the worst things that you can do is try and confront problems alone. There are very few, if any, significant forks in the road that I have to face in life that I deal with alone. I always seek counsel from 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes as many as 5 people. I do that for many things. Even yesterday, I was looking at a domain name that I wanted to purchase, and I had a few options, and I texted a few people for something as insignificant as a URL that I'm buying. So I think it's really, really important to seek counsel. And Napoleon Hill shows us in Think and Grow Rich, they don't necessarily need to be alive. There are people who have been profound mentors for me who I haven't really spent a lot of time with as well. When I was in 2012, when I was living in Boston, I had just moved there and I was studying out there, and I was in a city where I didn't know anyone. And a friend from Australia had messaged me and said, there's a book that you would love called Crush It by a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk. And I'd never heard of Gary Vaynerchuk. And he was an enormous inspiration for me. I got to meet him a few years ago when I heard him speak. I don't follow as much of Gary's content anymore because I think it's just such a noisy world at the moment. But he was hugely inspirational for me in feeling like you have a voice, because we all have a voice. So there are all these different, even people like Elon Musk, who I greatly respect for being able to help change the world and dig deep for a mission that's far greater than himself. There are so many people out there who I have never met before, who I feel like have been great sources of counsel for me in difficult moments, despite the fact that we have never met, because they help you give clarity on who you are. And the clearer you are on who you are and where you want to go, one of the best things that does, if not the best thing, it eradicates all the complexity. So it gives you crystal clear idea of what decisions that you need to make. So if you have a choice, do I want to go out drinking till 5 a.m. or am I going to stay here and work on a business, or do I have an option of doing something that could be a huge source of growth, like going to an event or sitting here and watching TV? It's like, well, it helps you make that decision because you know who you're meant. Yeah, it really does. It clarifies everything completely.
Beautiful, beautiful. That resonates big time and has been a huge part and one of the big takeaways from listening to the said 100 hours of listening to his teachings was the power of seeking that counsel within.
And you know who I found before Napoleon Hill was actually Jim Rohn. I used to listen. I've listened to probably 5,000 hours of Jim Rohn's things. There's a thing called the Jim Rohn Smooth Mix on Spotify. I still listen to it probably once a week. It's phenomenal. And it was only later when I found out that Jim Rohn was massively, if not totally, inspired by Napoleon Hill as well. So it's funny that I actually had to go back to Napoleon Hill because Jim Rohn was the one that really got me excited about all that stuff, that I went back to revisit his biggest influence being Napoleon Hill. Sorry, I feel like I cut you off there.
No, that's okay. Yeah. Another testament to our conversation here and the fact that that these teachings have impacted so many people and the people that are moving and shaping our world, seem to, there's a correlation of being inspired by these teachings to really connect the dots and to plant the seeds of thinking correctly so we can rebuild our lives from the ground up.
Definitely. And a lot of people listening right now probably know Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, the TV show, who sold her business for $66 million. The Corcoran Group, she's done remarkably well. And she told me during our interview for Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, she said her original copy of Think and Grow Rich looked like it had been dipped in a vat of yellow paint. She had highlighted it that often as well. So it doesn't need to be Napoleon Hill. It doesn't need to be Think and Grow Rich. It doesn't need to be Jim Rohn. You can find these mentors from wherever you want, whoever it is that excites you the most. But you're not going to find it unless you search. So I think they are a great place to start for people who are looking for a bit of direction. But your search doesn't need to stop there.
Yeah, beautifully said. One of the programs that it was really, really powerful for me was the idea that we have unchallengeable control over our mind to be directed to any
object
of our own choosing, and that was really which denotes willpower, and that we do have will, and our thoughts do indeed shape our reality.
Huge. I love that. And actually this Mental Dynamite book coming out next year is all about the will to win. And I think that is so important. It's just weird to me when I feel like at the age of 23 was about the first time when I started to sort of take the reins of my life for the very first time and plant a flag to say, here I am, come and try and stop me.
Ooh, I like that spirit.
Yeah, so that was the journey that I've been on for 13 years now, because I'm 36, and that's had many, many ups and downs. But in that process it's like compound interest. That the more you stick at it, that you will start to see its results more and more over time. And that's when you reach a point where the law of attraction really kicks in, where you start to attract opportunities to you rather than you needing to go out and seek them as well. So having that will to win in a sustained manner, I think is really, really important. And even Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first person to climb Everest, he spoke about the will to win. He spoke about after they had climbed, he said, it's not the mountain we conquer, it's ourselves, referencing that will to win. That is absolutely everything. It's so important, and it's that will to win that creates that resourcefulness and creates that resilience that I was talking about earlier. And in my own career, being a kid from Brisbane, Australia, which is the third biggest city in Australia, to be over here writing a modern version of the book that changed my father's life, and to be involved in the film for the first time, and then to be in places like New York, speaking at an international book buyers conference and things like that, to me is on the one hand, it's just seems so bizarre, but to me it's a real testament of being able to take ownership and take the reins and having that will to win, because I'm just excited to see where it ends up in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years as well.
As am I. I'm very excited about your projects and anything I can do to help push your work forward, as I truly admire what these teachings mean for our human family. And I think that we're in a time with what we were talking about earlier with this, our mental health numbers that are staggering, but this overall sense of apathy and lack of meaning. And this can be an antidote to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
Sex transmutation. That was, I think, chapter 11 of the original Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich. And that had a profound, impact on me, was the idea that that sexual energy has two channels. We channel it to make babies, which are miracles in their own way, and we channel it to create ideas and create projects, and we channel it into thinking. Can you speak a little bit to that and to how I thought that it was really, really profound, and this just helped me wrap my hands around my journey and looking at sex differently and the power of this, because we let's be real, we live in a pretty sick society when it comes to sex here in the
more and more
West.
Getting revealed when you hear about stuff like Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew and all these different things that are coming out more and more as well. But it's a question that I get actually asked a lot. It is by far the most controversial of the 13 principles from Napoleon Hill's achievement philosophy. Yet it is the one that people have come up to me as well, sometimes in public, other times in private, to say that, wow, this was the thing that completely changed my life as well. Yeah. I also liken it to the way that Bruce Lee talks about adaptability, being like water, where water always finds a way. If you try and refuse that energy, then you're going to live an extremely subdued life that might find an outlet in an extremely destructive manner, or you can harness it to extreme creative endeavors as well, which is what all these people in this, through Think and Grow Rich and Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy have done as well. And the two people that I highlighted in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy that personified that principle was John Shin, who's a guy here with 4 kids. He's got a fantastic family. And the other one was Lionel Souza, based in San Antonio, I believe, who's a big advertising guru, who's also got a huge family, because I really feel like family values are really at the root of society. And I think it's important for us as parents to lead and create that sense of increasing challenge in children, rather than having blind praise or going the complete other way and being abusive as well. I really think the biggest problem with our educational system is that we don't create a forum for children to be excited about the pursuit of increasing challenge as well, to want to seek it out, to do better, to identify self-effort towards a long-term income. And I think these days, when we talk about sexual transmutation, we are in a society where it's very, very easy for you to corrupt yourself or be corrupted in your own room with technology and things as well.
Pornography. I mean, yeah, we live in a generation now where there's it's so unbelievably pervasive. They can't even find subgroups of people that aren't affected by it.
Wow.
And for researching purposes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's you click a few buttons on your smartphone, and kids are having exposure to this at 6, 7, 8 years old now.
Crazy. It's absolutely horrible. And I guess as a parent of a 7-month-old now as well, these are the things that you worry about that will keep you up at night as well. And a big part of this as well, like any addiction that you face, in my experience, it is the times when you're sitting at home with nothing to do. They are the times when this addiction can rear its ugly head in the worst way. If you've got some type of productive goal in mind.
That's the definiteness of purpose.
Yep,
which
absolutely.
is foundational, is that,
And you have constructive actions that you can take each day to make that happen, and you keep yourself busy in pursuit of this end game. That is when you're far less likely to fall victim or relapse into any of these forms of addiction as well. That's what someone like Grant Cardone who's the second story in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy, he owns, I think it's more than 5,000 properties in America now. He's documenting his journey to being a billionaire. He's not everyone's cup of tea. I think he's great, but I guess he's like a Gary Vaynerchuk, where you naturally find people that you gravitate more towards. So that's totally
he
fine.
Polarizes.
Yeah, he does. He absolutely polarizes, which is, I guess, is a big part of him building his brand as well. But his big part about addiction was, I think it was at the age of 23 when he was beaten within an inch of his life and refused access to his own mother's house, that he was checked into rehab. And in rehab, they said he had to give up all these big goals. They said he couldn't have a private jet. He couldn't have these fancy cars. He couldn't have these fancy houses, because the moment he realized he couldn't attain these things, he would go straight back to using drugs. And their solution was to give him different drugs each day to help him sustain his life. And to him pharmaceuticals. And to him that seemed absolutely crazy. Like to us, it seems absolutely crazy. And he hasn't taken a single recreational drug since. And now he has the jets, he has the cars, he has the houses as well, using the power of his mind, because he recognized that just because he went down a wrong path, it was at the age of 25. So from the age of 15, after the loss of the 3 most significant male mentors in his life, being his father, his grandfather, and his brother, he started using drugs every single day. He was offered drugs in the schoolyard, and he used drugs every day for the next 10 years.
To fill that void?
Yep,
To get that sense of
sense of
incomplete wholeness, but it was,
or even
yeah.
a sense of escape as well. I'm
Yeah.
sure it was probably all those things.
Yeah.
At the age of 15, there are people from good families who would say yes in that situation. I certainly, if I had been in that situation, would have said, yeah, I said yes to drugs and to schoolyard without having to go through those things as well. So I can't imagine what that would be like. And Grant's whole thing was just because you went down the wrong way down a street, that didn't mean that you couldn't turn around and come back. He was very uncomfortable being labeled an addict for the rest of his life. And that's why I think any labels that we have in this world can be extremely dangerous, especially negative ones.
Yeah, that's very topical. Tomorrow I'm interviewing a guy, Dr. Adi Jaffe, who's got a TED Talk. It's on that same topic of these labels that we have, and he's a doctor at UCLA, and he had some major challenges and drug addiction, and I believe he was even incarcerated at some point, and he turned his life around and is on a mission to share and to kind of disprove this theory as we throw the baby out with the bathwater so often in our society when people go through challenging times. And that's another, as I affectionately call in the book, a bullshit incorporated program that, no, I mean, these adversities, they're the training grounds of and everybody goes through them. It's just that people aren't talking about these challenges that they're going through. And I think that the more we get open and honest dialogue and we're shifting this definition of masculinity and addressing the toxic masculinity or toxic aspects of masculinity, where these programs, we can shed them and people will be more apt to speak openly.
For sure. And I think even where children come to mind, where even labels, it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative one, like being able to label your kid a genius. All that then says to them is, I don't need to put in that level of effort as well. Just like we spoke about earlier, the importance of getting kids excited and teaching them about the importance of increasing challenge. I think getting them to recognize and develop a passion for lifelong learning is just as important, regardless of what natural talents they have. Maybe they would be a lot better off of course they would be a lot better off if they had natural talents, but they had that passion for lifelong learning and increasing challenge at the same time, rather than thinking, oh, wow, I'm good at something at the age of 10. Who gives a shit? I did a talk recently in Brisbane in Australia, and they had, there are kids in high school where if you get an OP1, that's the absolute top grade you can get. I'm not sure of what the equivalent is for high school in America. And so if you get an OP1 in high school, you're considered exceptionally bright and you have your pick of any university and university program that you want to go to. And there was one of these OP1 kids who was sitting at this table and was just so disinterested in my talk. And I just thought to myself, wow, I feel like an OP1 in a way. It says to someone, this person is bright, this person can have any future that they want, but it's almost done in a bad way because they don't. It's almost like they get spoon-fed some type of entitlement from that point. Where
Entitlement works both ways.
Absolutely.
I talk about that in Worth the Fight, that it goes to the homeless person shaking the cup, the woe is me, and it goes to, ultimately leads to the wolf on Wall Street.
For sure.
So unbelievably disconnected, and that's trauma being projected in two different directions.
So true. And if I'm hiring people for a business, I would much rather hire someone who's a middle of the road grade, who's gone through extreme adversity in life and has learned a lot and is great with people and has a passion for increasing challenge and lifelong learning, versus someone who's just academic and book smart. I mean, who cares? Another big thing of Napoleon Hill is education and knowledge alone is meaningless. It's what you do with what you know. Yeah, action is the real measure of intelligence.
Absolutely.
And I can't think of something more stale or someone more stale than an academic who has no real world experience or has no real world application for the amount of things that they know, because they really know nothing if they don't apply it.
Well said. Beautifully said. Well, I've really enjoyed this time with you, James. Are there any parting words that you'd like to share? And where can people find you?
I think the biggest one to probably share actually is that each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. Each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. Because when you wake up, when I talk about winning the day, it's waking up on any given day and knowing what actions that you need to take on that day and how they relate to your long-term mission. That is a trajectory that you can achieve anything you want in life over time. So that's probably a nice final word to finish on. And anyone who wants to get in touch, you can go to my website, jameswitt.com, JamesWhitt.com, or on Instagram at jameswitt, or email james@jameswitt.com as well. So hit me up. I've got a success plan template actually that people can use to go, and that'll give you a very clear idea of who you are and where you want to go. If you're looking for some direction, that's available as a free download on my link in bio on Instagram. And if I can be of any service to anyone, just let me know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing with Think and Grow Rich, the legacy. I'm so excited about the additional projects that are in the hopper as well, and your commitment to keeping these teachings alive and keeping the integrity of them alive is very admirable. And I hope that people can read your book. I've been reading it; it's wonderful. And thank you so much for putting that out into the world and sharing your wisdom with my growing audience here.
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge you as well for all the amazing things that you're doing. You're on a very, very important mission, and I hope people are excited to participate in this mission to help change the narrative around all these different things that we have spoken about to help make this a brighter future for everyone.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again.
This has been Matt Simpson of the Worth the Fight podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more about our mission and message of hope and healing at worththefightbook.org. Please rate, review, and share this episode if you found value. Please help us expand our circle of influence and get these vital conversations out to our human family. Also, if you find yourself in a financial position to support the show, you can help us push forward these conversations with monthly donations on Patreon. Thank you again for listening. Much love, y'all. Peace.